The so we're going to give this from a go again.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone, back to regular board meeting Hastings and Hudson Board of Education for November 9th, 2022. This evening, we're going to welcome Principal Amy Casey's from Hillside, who's going to give us a presentation on the National Blue Ribbon School Award that Hillside received in the ceremony you guys attended last week in DC. So, welcome. Sure, come on.
John Hattie just through that experience. In COVID-19, there was an enormous amount of support for our students and for our teachers from each other. There was a lot of purpose and love being shared just because of the fact that everyone needed each other. Families had to overcome giant hurdles figuring out how to manage working and at the same time helping their kids be online. So this was a real experience for us, for all of us working together toward a common goal. In COVID-19, there was enormous gratitude. And I can personally reflect on the parade as we had the car parade that drove through town, and all of our kids and families were on the sidelines, and our teachers felt so filled with joy just seeing each other. It was a moment, and that is part of the excellence. COVID-19 could have divided us. It could have been something that broke us, but instead it actually made us stronger. Last year, I received via email a nomination for the National Blue Ribbon Award. And as you can imagine, I get a lot of emails. And my inbox was very full. And one day, Mike LaRocca, our assistant principal, was with me in the office, and I said, I just got an email from the National Blue Ribbon that we were nominated for this award. And Mike had been a part of the National Blue Ribbon School in his previous district, and he said, this is amazing. You have to go for it. Mike was the spark that lit the fire. He was the one who said, this is a valuable experience and don't pass it up. And with that, we decided that recognition matters, that this is the opportunity to be able to lift up everyone, our students, our staff, our community, because recognition does matter. And this excellence has truly been the excellence of our entire community. I put this blue ribbon on the slide because what I want you to know is that there's a blue ribbon on every door, literally in Hillside. And it's because everyone needs to know every day as they come to work that they are a part of this magic. So I just briefly want to bring you through the history of the National Blue Ribbon Award. This was founded in 1982, and we're talking 40 years ago that this award was founded. And if you see, what we learned was that the reason for this award was because they wanted to highlight schools that model the kind of excellence and sound practice that all American schools can strive for and reach. They literally said, we need to replicate it. This is a quote that I wrote down from the Blue Ribbon Award ceremony. This award is about celebrating what is right in our education system. Many awards have been given to many schools over the last 40 years, and Hastings has been a National Blue Ribbon district and has had schools in the district win 5 times. So that's something that's especially notable. Each school in our district has had the experience of being a National Blue Ribbon school. This quote came directly from the materials the National Blue Ribbon Association provided to us. The National Blue Ribbon School Award acknowledges and validates the hard work of students, educators, families, and communities in aiming for and reaching educational excellence. I included this slide because this is a perfect example of why this award is about all of us. None of us could have done this alone. Every single person, every single child, every single educator, every single family, and community member has helped to be able to make Hillside what it is. Every single one of us has contributed to the excellence. So I'd like to briefly walk you through our application process. It was an in-depth process. The application itself was about 20 pages long, and it required a very in-depth look at all of these different categories. It required us as a staff to reflect and consider all of the work that we've done over the years and how that work has impacted our students. We spent multiple meetings working together with our teachers to be able to develop this In addition, the 2022 National Teacher of the Year, Kurt Russell, spoke with us. His words were very meaningful because what he talked about is how important the work of teachers and communities is in order to help our students be the best they can be. One of the things about the experience with BC was that it gave us the chance to reflect. It gave us the chance to pause, which we never do in this business. And it gave us the opportunity to really realize what a moment of pride this is for all of us as a community. In fact, in our folders that we received when we were in DC, there was even this recognition letter from President Biden, and I just had to share it because, who gets a letter from President Biden? So I just lifted a couple of quotes for you to see here. Celebrates visionary leaders, gifted teachers, and involved parents who have propelled students to high standards and fostered their love of learning. And another quote, appreciate the important work you do in providing challenging instruction and a positive environment in which students can learn and excel. And now we are ready for our celebration. So we came back from Washington, D.C. with a whole lot of pride, a whole lot of energy, and enthusiasm. And we are ready to launch next week our National Blue Ribbon Week at Hillside. We've put together a committee of teachers that is called our National Blue Ribbon Committee. And we literally just got together and brainstormed ideas of what could we do this week. The sky's the limit, let's dream. And together we dreamed, and we made a very long list of exciting things because we are an elementary school, and part of the fun of being an elementary school is the celebration. PTSA, SEPTA, community members have supported us with a lot of supplies for next week, which will be part of the celebration. The celebration will include everyone because, again, this award is for everyone. So we will have our kickoff assembly on Monday, and that assembly will be loaded with surprises for everyone. In addition, a live stream link was shared with the entire community so that everyone can participate and be part of the excitement. On Tuesday, we're scheduled to have a Hillside Hero Gallery walk where every child will have their balloon and every staff member will have their balloon on the wall and be applauded by their peers. On Wednesday, we're scheduled to have a blue ribbon photo shoot where there will be a drone that takes our picture that can then hang on the wall of our school for a long time. We'll have a special event called Walk the Blue Carpet, much like Walk the Red Carpet, but this one will be blue. We'll have blue paraphernalia for students to decorate themselves as we take pictures. We've also invited our 5th graders up because what we know is that our 5th graders were at Hillside for this 2022 award. And then on Friday, finally, we will have our Excellence Assembly with a professional Blue Man that was in the Blue Man group. So we're very excited about this experience. All of the students will be learning about the Blue Man group so they have the background knowledge to be able to enjoy this presentation. There are also a number of staff surprises that will be coming next week because this is about fun and we're ready for some fun. To conclude, this quote, this Helen Keller quote, was a quote that I used in my very first year at Hillside, and it stands alone. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. This award is a result of a shared vision. It's a result of all of us growing in the same direction, making sure that we're heading where we want to be. It's the strong momentum that we have to move toward excellence and ultimately to do great things for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Casey. Thank you very much. Any comments or? I just want to say, the celebration looks amazing, and the last thing I remember being this immersive at this age, I'm dating myself a little bit, was the centennial celebration. Am I on? Do I have to push it? I'm on. I guess I have a very quiet voice. The last thing I remember being this immersive when I was this age was the centennial celebration in 1976, and that always stuck with me. So this sounds fantastic, and I want to thank the whole school and district and everybody for coming together to put this together. Coming out of COVID, to be one of 20 schools and 800 districts in New York State, it's really an accomplishment. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
I just have a question. You said that somebody nominated you? Is that right? Who nominated
We
you?
don't know that information. We got an email that said you were nominated for.
Was it from a community member? I'm just curious.
I don't have that information. It just says for the National Blue Ribbon, for the government, which is what we were nominated for.
Doreen.
So it could have been a community member.
Yeah, I can speak to that if you want. There's a process, it's actually the reason, it was funny in DC, the amount of technical problems they were having. Remember the chief state school officers, they were about to run a welcome from, and so chief state school officers nominate a certain number in each state based on a set of metrics. So that's the process. The independent schools, because they're independent schools, preferred name in that world, and the parochial schools also have nominating bodies. But you would have come through, Hillside, would have come through somewhere with the New York State Chief State School Officer and a set of metrics.
Lovely.
I just want to say to Amy that, I think that it's the community and everybody else, but as soon as you came on board in Hastings, it was clear that you had a vision for what you wanted to be, but more importantly, you also had the drive to do it. A lot of people have visions and they don't have the drive. And I think that really came out in COVID. I really admired you for when we were supposed to be every other day and you were like, that's not going to work for me. My kids need to be in school every day and if it's happening, we can figure it out. So congratulations. It's an amazing achievement from your leadership and then trickle down, of course, to everybody in the group. So I'm so proud to be part of Hastings. Thank you.
I would like to add my voice to this. So I remember, most of you know that when I see Amy, I lighten up. When I freshly joined the board, I've been part of the community engagements with some of the call to the community to support. One of the concern, and I have a son in Hillside, so I hear a lot as well. So I remember when the previous superintendent was here, Valerie, I was very excited that you called an ELA to assess. That I knew was going to happen. Like, I knew that was the right thing. You cannot deal with the problem without assessing it first. And you knew what you were doing. So I was very happy about that. And this is the fruit of making sure that you understand a problem before you solve it. So I just wanted to say congratulations. There's an email I sent to you, which also involves other community members to thank you, and I want to read it out, but I know you already saw it. So this is from me and from others. We want to congratulate you. We are proud of the district's collective work, our teachers' work, and your leadership, as echoed by my colleague here, in making Hillside a blue ribbon school. As we continue on this trajectory, we ask that you keep the momentum, being intentional about inclusivity, which you've done, of marginalized groups in our schools, especially special ed kids and persons of color. I will urge that you continue to employ the support for our kids as you have done in the past by engaging through the lens of their lived experiences. Again, congratulations from all of us, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lang. Amy, thank you so much, and we're
Amy,
looking forward
can I
to
just
next
say
week.
one thing to you
Oh,
before
sure.
you step away? I just wanted to say that I've gotten to have the opportunity to work with you on a few different fronts because I sat on the PTSA board when you were actually interviewed to come and take this job, and I remember the excitement that was brimming over from the parent population when they talked about the literacy experience that you brought into the district, and I think that having that passion and that enthusiasm really permeated the school. I think that you have been a transformational figure in the way that you've really gotten the staff to really work together and to be a cohesive unit, and what service that has been. That's obviously culminated in this fantastic award that reflects not just your work, but the work of all the staff and all the aides and everybody who represents Hillside. And I can also say that, you know, having served on the board during the bad COVID times, you really were just such a warrior in terms of really bringing the services to the students in the way that was really able to serve the needs that they had. And those were really challenging times, and you were very stalwart in what you wanted to bring to your student population, and I commend you for that. And just as a parent, you know, my son started kindergarten when you started being the principal the first year, and I can just say, you know, as the parent of 3 boys who've gone through Hillside, he really had an excellent experience. He's so, you know, I think he was so well served by having been there under your leadership. So I commend you, I commend the entire school, and I feel like we're just so lucky for all the great work that Hillside is doing as a collective unit. So thank you. I don't really have beautiful words to say that, but I just wanted to say that with sincerity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
If there are no other board comments, I want to add a couple things, because I was lucky enough to be in the supporting team cast down there for Amy and Phyllis this last week. And I did edit the slides a little bit. I intentionally tied President Reagan, into this impetus of this, and I was going to put a nation at risk there, because, and then fast forward in your deck to President Biden. This is a rare moment of all of us in this nation agreeing. And in those couple days in Washington, and the timing of being there then, this is all agreeing that excellence matters, what Hillside stands for matters, regardless of your perspective, politically, otherwise. It's a coming together, and that was clear to me for 2 days there. I used to go to conferences all the time, as I mentioned to Melissa Szymanski, got sick of them. I don't go to them. But now I did, and I was very glad for it. One, to see you and Phyllis operating so well prepared. Because the other thing goes on with these wards, they say, oh, a school gets it, and they go to sleep. The school gets it, and they go to sleep. It's clear to know that Hillside will not go to sleep, because you were down there, and I was listening to you talk to some of your peer schools, and I could see them going, oh my goodness, they've got all this other stuff planned. They're going to springboard this into all sorts of other work. So I want to compliment you that. I'm going to echo Dr. Lang that we'll keep it going. I'll be keeping the supporting cast on that, so we can springboard this. For Hillside and district-wide, I think there's some good legs into the portrait process. Mm-hmm. So I really want to see that those are active, real legs. But again, hats off to you, Amy. Hats off to how you've made this totally inclusive. And I know you'll keep doing that.
And Amy, I just want to say thank you. It is clear to me that you are an amazing instructional leader. It is my honor and privilege to partner with you on curricular work, and I continue to be impressed constantly. So thank you for everything you do. I know we were talking about work even next week, so to the point just made, just constant springboard and moving forward. And I know that your commitment firmly centers students all the time and also honors where the adult learners are. And I just want to say thank you.
How appropriate that the celebrations are going to be the week before Thanksgiving.
My birthday. Thank you, Principal Casey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy.
Look forward to it. All right. We're going to move on to a budget prep session for the coming year with Marie Cavallo. And tonight's it's the macro, big picture, drivers, revenue. Okay.
Work session, correct?
I don't know, what's the official designation?
I mean, it's part of the meeting, and so we're just digging in, so.
Yeah, I think as the last time, we had hoped to go into a work session and then ran late, so I guess the thinking was just to put it in front of the meeting and then.
Is this similar to stuff that you covered? Remember the Budget 101 that you did?
Yeah, much of it is. And
Okay.
it just kind of helps start at the macro view, because I think just kind of getting a sense of budget growth as holistically and looking at the different, our revenues and things like that, kind of to set the stage for kind of the more in-depth conversations. So it is things, this is very similar, and so I will start here. And one of the things things we do quite often, or I incorporate in the budget process, is we should always be not only looking at our current and possibly the projected budget, but also looking at a 5-year projection. And those 5-year projections give us some sense, because anything obviously you're contemplating or thinking about doing, it's not so much about if you can afford it in that particular year or the next year. It's about the sustainability and looking at it in terms of the your overall kind of projections in the future. So Really just starting tonight, what we hope to kind of just go over again is looking at those expenditure projections. I can tell you I didn't want to change this presentation, but even in the last few weeks since I put this initially together, we're getting some better information around what our retirement contributions, what the New York State is projecting our retirement contributions to be, which actually are a little bit more favorable. I mean, slightly more favorable, but that's good news that we've received. But we'll just look at kind of at different levels what those dollars would mean for us. We're also going to be reviewing again revenue projections, because again we are required to balance a budget each year, and the revenue projections, and looking at where our historical state aid has been and some details about revenue, and again just to give some more insight into the ways we, other than taxes, receive some revenues. And then again, to remind everyone of our budget development process, our internal working calendar, which is working amongst the buildings and, kind of leading up to some of those budget presentations to the board. And then again, next topics for budget workshops. And we wanted to kind of focus. Again, this is just a very quick snapshot of Hastings historical budgets. I mean, obviously, like anything else, looking at numbers without some kind of context about what were the moving parts in those given years. But I think it's just something as we look, and many times, and people are correct in saying this, they see the budget grow pretty exponentially, like in a 5-year period, and you can kind of just see on these trends how, budgets over the years have grown, but where we have at times, and again, where the years in which we've been able to kind of pull things in or be a little bit more modest depending on what's going on, we have attempted to do so. And again, last year, again, the 22-23 year, we do know that a significant, or a part of that larger increase was that some of that newer debt coming on the books. And, prior to that, the 3 years previous to the 22-23 budget, we have tried to keep it at a modest growth. But again, we really do have to continue to look at this and look at how those numbers and how they really impact that longer term budget.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
maybe
of course.
before we move on? Can you just explain for people who might be watching in the community, since we're trying to start this budget process early, what the difference is between the tax rate and the tax levy?
Okay, so I'll start with the tax levy. So the levy is the year-over-year change in how many dollars in total we are leveraging as part of the budget. So the tax levy is a revenue part of our budget. That levy increase is speaking about the increase of that line year over year. The resulting tax rate is a result, that's one of the pieces of the equation, and the other piece in how that tax rate is determined is the change in assessed valuation. What we have seen the last few years, it's been a bit more erratic, because as people who live here know, that there was also a reassessment that had been done by the town a few years back. And what we experienced this past year was there was a delay in those assessments being actually pushed down into taxpayers. So, and if there's, which doesn't happen often here, but when there's either an increase of assessed valuation, just pure like real new assessment, either a business or something that would come to town, that kind of helps bring that tax rate down. But then on the other side, when you lose assessed valuation, even without increasing spending, it would increase taxes. So yes, that's a difference. And I think that'll be, as you mentioned, we'll have to make sure even our budget documents this year really are more helpful in like spelling that out, because I know we use them and they're different. And our tax levy is the number in which is subject to the tax cap calculation. So just kind of moving on, and I know for the board, I know on this screen it may be difficult to read. This is an exercise that we had done even prior to it being kind of a requirement, just to kind of look at this. And I think a few years back, there was this recommendation to, use these documents and share them publicly, because again, how do you make a decision for a year or a budget without understanding what that may look like over the long term? Because as we've talked about, our numbers really compound pretty quickly here, and even sometimes when I'm looking at the numbers, I'm like, wait, like that just seems like the growth, it really, we can see how quickly a $55 million budget can kind of balloon to like a $60 million budget. Even where we're relatively trying to keep a low growth number, kind of pretty quickly occurs. So just kind of focusing, and I'm not going to take too much time here, but just, we all know that our budget this year is $55,293,000. Kind of looking at the time I did this projection, which was probably not a full month ago, but about October 17th or so, kind of looking at where some of our numbers, again, of course, right now being conservative because we are still in the earlier part of the school year with, a good amount of time left on the books. But right now it seems as though we're tracking at about a $54,400,000 or $500,000, what we expect to spend by the end of the year. And at a different time, I mean, if anyone had any specific questions, you can kind of see in the different buckets where either we're trending a little bit more favorably, typically in salaries, that's because you project, we didn't have we didn't have a contract in place, so of course, with all of our bargaining units, some of them were projections, coupled with some changes in staffing. So that's typically where you'll see some shifts in those numbers. Benefits, similarly, you could, we project a number, and then depending upon, the final number, particularly in health insurance, where we project it based upon what we think people will elect, and those things sometimes shift, and I'll either see a positive or negative variance in those numbers. Right now we're up a bit in transportation, but everything else except for special education, which is always a part of our budget historically, that is it's a very difficult part of the budget to project because it's really based on individual student needs. And we do try to do budget as conservatively as possible, but currently we're tracking about $300,000 in savings in that area. And then again, as you kind of look at the breakdown, that leaves us with trending at about a $54,500,000 estimated end of year. Then looking just these numbers again, when we blow our 5-year projections, we are always looking at the estimated end of year. We don't look at like our previous budget, although the numbers of the percent changes are based upon the previous budget change, but they are there. We start at where we currently are, not where we thought we would be, to kind of build our projections. So, as I had mentioned earlier, the good news is since I originally did these, both the ERS and TRS currently, although not a huge dip, are slightly lower than the rates we're paying in this year, which of course a lot of people were projecting those to be higher next year. So, we should see a little bit of, these numbers should shift down a bit in the employee benefit section. But that being said, we're looking, at our current kind of, if this is not the way we do our budget, but if nothing else were to change and we had the same staff and pretty much the same students, needs that were similar to our estimated end of year, our projection would put us at about 2%. To a little bit, because of that lower benefit number, we're tracking right now to like a 2.5% increase year over year. And again, looking at the real dollars behind that, it is millions of dollars, and you can see even at those kind of lower modest projections where, pretty quickly by 25, 26, you could get to that $60 million budget range. So again, just is why each year it is really critically important, as we do internally, is we do start with what we call a zero budget base for the most part. I mean, meaning that we do ask people to, except for staff, most of the time we roll it over. It's enrollment driven, but in other areas of the budget, we still do want a justification for why they're proposing what they're proposing. Actually, this year I did include a few additional sheets in the budget packets that I found by looking at other, what some of my colleagues were using, that I think even when we talk about shifts, sometimes when we have FTEs, we may say, we'll open up this elective, but we're really trying to have people, even in looking at the current staffing model, really really break down or really think through, like, just because you have a certain level of staffing, what we definitely need and is it effective use of staffing resources? So I'm trying to incorporate a little bit more, more information to be given back so we can really do a deeper analysis of it, because as we always talk about, our staffing is the majority of our budget. It's that's the place. I mean, we can cut some of the supply and some of those costs, but that's really not changing what we're spending. So again, this just gives you a snapshot, very, very basic, without really going in and having a better understanding around some of these numbers. But looking at our current trending, we are seeing significant increases in our utility costs and some things, and transportation is always one of those areas of the budget that it grows. It's an expensive service, and it tends to grow fairly, significantly or consistently, I'll say, over the years. But just looking at, where that would put us is a place that we kind of look at to kind of have an understanding. And as people, which they will do, will be looking to increase their budgets. Because although we're asking, sorry, Jeremy, yes?
Could you possibly just clear up, I know we don't spend $300,000 per student. So that line that says per pupil allocation means something else.
Yes.
Would you speak to that?
Of course. So what that speaks to is the money that is allotted for library, for software, certain student softwares, more so in the area of library and media, and textbooks, and actually consumable supplies. So typically the allotment, and again, I actually dropped it a bit this year, would be between $200 to $250 per student. At the elementary level, you'll see more consumables and workbooks being used. And again, that's the money that this is covered on. Typically, each year, if you think about that $300,000, we spend about $100,000 to $150,000 alone in textbooks and replacements. And textbooks include software licensing. And even when you're not receiving a hard copy of a book, the price for that license is exactly the same, to be honest with you, because textbook companies are, they're not losing money. You're welcome.
Maureen, can I
Yes.
just ask,
Sure.
looking at the number one driver of the number one expenditure after salaries and employee benefits is special education.
Yes.
So within that special education number is not teacher salary.
It is not.
And so can you just give me like a couple of the big
Sure.
things and that's that one?
Sure.
You're on slide 5.
Yep. No. Slide 4 I'm on. So looking at that special education number, the major components that I can, just thinking about how we budgeted it this year, there was about $1.4 million of tuition, non-BOCES tuition budgeted there. There's about $300,000 so of settlements that we had committed to budget, like as part of this $3 million. There's about a little bit over $1 million worth of contractual services, and that includes our occupational therapists that are not employees of the district, but we contract, our ABA behavioral specialists that come in and work with us every day, speech and language, in addition to our own teachers that we have, psychological evaluations that are done by external folks. And basically that allots to with some other kind of specialty services that they may need. It could be a teacher of the blind or different kind of people that come in that we don't have on staff. That's about $1 million. And then the remainder of that is between BOCES and different services. And we also send some of our children need, to graduate. They need that extra OCED kind of certification in the special ed. So that's the majority of it, and it includes, like, does not include all the staffing.
So I have a follow-up.
Sure.
So if I'm correct me if I'm wrong in analyzing this. So $1 million of the $3 million that is connected to special ed is still instructions. We are paying
It's all
teach-
instructional.
It's all instructions. So in my head, if we are talking about general ed and special ed, I can confidently say that that also goes to the salaries of the special ed.
Yeah.
So the fact of the matter is that what is connected to special ed will be 2 million, because that 1 million is going to paying instructors that are specialized to support the students.
But they're
But they are not our
contractors,
district.
correct.
I know.
Yeah, but they're still teachers.
They
You're
are
right,
still
so it's
teachers,
yes, correct.
exactly,
That is
because
correct,
sometimes
yes.
people are looking at
Oh, that's a good
the,
point.
yeah, looking at it
Yes.
like, oh, special ed and oh, what about, oh, general ed, you know? So I'm just trying to delineate that now.
Yes.
And then the second point is that the remainder of the 2 million, if we should move that 1 million to instruction, which is due special ed and general ed equally, that 2 million, part of it is also going to BOCES.
Correct.
And so that in itself can also shift to the BOCES/technology that general ed students also need to have access to.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, what is really assigned to special ed is not as huge as it seems here if we are looking at the bare bone of the services. The only thing is that the anomaly, I don't like to call it abnormal, but the anomaly is not structured within the district in a way that we need to get
Right.
that additional help,
Yes.
and that's all there is to it.
Yes.
So I wanted to delineate that,
Yeah,
okay?
no,
Thanks.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, many times, I mean, it is a way that kind of people do break down their budgets, but I would agree that that is, there's, you know, other things that have a significant cost that are kind of buried in other areas of the budget. So I think as we talk about, you know, sometimes it kind of stands out, but it is, and there are some building level services that non-special ed children, although it is kind of captured in here, receive for like OT and PT and things of that nature as well, that is covered under some of those contracts, like kind of under the MTSS window.
Yeah,
Umbrella.
correct. I just wanted to also add that, so probably, I know that we can't do anything about it, because I remember you stated that we need to record the numbers for special ed for auditing purposes. So there's no way we can sort of shift numbers to other places. Because I remember you said the state requires that clear.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so
yes.
I take
The
my
state, so
suggestion
under,
back.
yeah, so under, there's a calculator we're required to do each year, oh my gosh, what the heck, maintenance of effort, yeah, the MOE calculator. So that was incorporated not so much for districts like our own, but where, you know, there was obviously times where there was inequitable cuts being done to special ed. So as part of like something with the federal law, that they do want us to pull out those costs. And it was really just in an effort to ensure that students were receiving what they should be receiving. And to show that, and if you have in our budget, when we have, you're allowed to, of course, have it go down at times, but when they would kind of flag it and say, you know, can you kind of offer us why, you know, on this year, and it could be that you have less students or more students in district, but they do flag it to ensure that we're, you know, properly funding that area of our budget.
Thank you. And one last
Sure, of
question.
course.
The other, can
Yes.
you throw some light onto what that
Yeah.
is?
So other, and again, I know so other would include everything from our general insurance policy for the schools, which is about $200,000 just to kind of insure our buildings and, you know, everything that you would imagine when our assets are worth, you know, a few $100 million. So our insurance is about 200 and change. Workers' comp, actually, I think workers' comp is also included in that. Our BOCES, there's a BOCES fee that is not in the BOCES in tech services. It's actually captured there for capital. I'm trying to think what else. Things like district clerk, like even any contractual services that are like, I mean, although this would be a small piece of it, even like our board docs or things that we would not be captured elsewhere. So, and again, there's kind of a laundry list of things, but I would say that the larger, and then also our like Greenberg assessment, which is, it's only about 40,000, but you know, a big chunk of that is insurance and things such as that, like liabilities.
And then I have a question about the transportation.
Sure.
I thought I remembered we had a conversation about, in 2025, there was gonna be an expectation that all school buses had to move to be electric.
Yes, that is true.
So I just thought that meant we'd see a big bump.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say yes, that's what I would, right now, this 5-year projection, again, does not include that level of detail, because I think I think there's a couple of things. I think people are wondering whether that'll get pushed off, quite frankly, only because I think it will be quite difficult, you know, just to have the fleet that you would need and the infrastructure to support it locally. So I think that this is kind of an optimistic view of that.
Got it, thank you.
Yes. But those are kind of things, like, as you said, and that would potentially, if we had more information on that, those are kind of things that then, you know, get factored in.
Before we leave this page,
Sure.
I like how we started, you know, it looks like going back 18 years, you know, to share with the public what our increases are. But the 2% tax cap didn't affect, how many years has that been in effect, I guess?
2012, I think.
Yeah, is it 2012 it came in?
2012, okay. So, I mean, looking at there, did we, so in 18 and 19 and 2020, we were over a 2% tax levy increase there. But that might have been with certain areas that we were allowed to go over the 2%.
Yeah, so I can tell you that I believe it's the 18-19 budget. So there were a few things we did have. I think it was 18-19 when the debt for the field projects came on, which is an exclusion.
Right.
And then also, if I'm not sure if you recall that the large property, the home, yes, I didn't, yes, that when that came online, that increased our assessed valuation, and that's a year actually where the board at that time, it was a rare opportunity where we did receive, like, one new homeowner was actually adding $1 million of new revenue.
Of 2%, good.
For 2%. And then we did increase our budget, so there's also, we're seeing that big thing, but there was also a larger, like, very purposeful increase of adding. That was the year we added, like, the guidance counselor to Hillside. There were quite a few new staff positions added that year.
Thank you. I wanted to point that out because when we go to our 5-year projection,
Yes.
we have numbers that aren't, you know, never before seen increases, but all 5 of our next budgets, if we look at those medium numbers, if we go 1 page down, I guess. from
Yes.
here.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm looking at my screen and I'm saying yes.
So our medium percent budget is pretty much 3% on from here on out.
Right.
And since that's not likely to be because of items that would be under the 2% cap, are we looking at possibly for the next 5 years having to pass budgets with 60% support from the community?
So when we get to the revenue slide, that will speak to.
I'll wait on that.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
But you know, again, being hopefully optimistic, we are, you know, with the hopes that if we see these benefit costs, especially kind of, hopefully they'll level out to kind of where they are, and hopefully we don't see any large increase there. You know, right now we are tracking for at least the 23-24 school year at the lower number, only because of those new, like, benefit projections. But to your point, that I think as you move forward, you are looking at that 3% number. So when we get to the revenue slide, that and we look at how that plays out on the actual tax cap and how that works, we can see where we are projecting currently to be short. like in terms of revenues to support these projections. Okay. So again, these are just a recap of the major drivers of expense. There's nothing here that, but then again, these are all the things that have factors into our budget. And again, new enrollments, as many people here know, in thinking about that historical slide, actually in the years where we were seeing some very high increases in the budget, those aren't years that we were actually experiencing large enrollment growth. I mean, it's good because we've been having a very steady, we've been experiencing a very steady stream of students in around that 1,600 to 1,700 number. And again, that obviously plays into our expenditures. So to Jeremy's question, as we look at our 5-year revenue projections, again, the first column there is our current spending plan and our current revenue plan, which is that $55 million number. The next column over, we're looking at where we're trending this year in terms of our actual revenues. And again, we are seeing those positive variances in the tuition lines and the sales tax, which, we'll see that now that we're comfortable in seeing that kind of steady stream of 900,000. Hopefully that'll remain, and, we'll be projecting those numbers out. But really just now focusing on what does it look like at this moment in time for that 23-24 number. And again, as you know, we do not have our state aid number as of yet. And the reason you're seeing that increase here in my projection is really solely based upon aid coming back for our building projects, which we're hoping that aid will hit next year. It should, because once we get certain paperwork in, we'll start seeing on different phases of that project those reimbursements that are coming back for some of that work. So again, just looking at it 23-24 school year and using that 2%, and you'll see where it says property tax line based on cap. We are just anticipating a 2% increase there on the number. And you can see that would allow us only to increase that levy by about $900,000. So the lines here are showing that for this upcoming budget, because again, especially if we're projecting at the negatives in the first two lines would mean that we would need, additional funds, but it's the opposite. This one balances, like right now, based upon closing those projects, getting our state aid in, seeing that kind of 1-year bump in our state aid number with some of those other revenues that are trending on the upside, which again, some of them are not as predictable as others. We're hoping to get that first year in that rental solar, which actually, I just had a meeting with them yesterday on the phone, so that looks like it's gonna be in place. Even possibly we may get some revenue this year on that. So next year for the 23-24 budget, unless there's other things that we're unaware of, which there may be, it seems as though we'll be able to come in at that tax cap number.
Marie, can I ask you a
Yes.
question just regarding the property taxes?
Mm-hmm.
It's been a very long time, 20 years since we had interest rates being raised at this level. Is it a thing that, if we have interest rates go up higher, mortgage origination goes down, home prices tend to follow that? Is that a real concern? Or is that something that's not, doesn't really show up? Basically, that home values, because of high mortgage costs, home prices adjust downward.
Yes.
And then assessed value goes down as well.
Well, for us, the assessed value is just part of a person's overall the tax rate, but it doesn't have any bearing on the tax levy number, because the tax levy is simply looking at what we previously were able to levy. I mean, I would say that 2% is, I wouldn't think that, you're talking about just like the inflationary numbers and stuff. I don't
Like
think
if the assessed value, if
that one doesn't play out in the tax cap though, that would only play out in the tax rate. So if the overall assessed valuation of the town drops, that, even if we don't spend one more dime, right, theoretically, like the tax rate would go up to close that gap.
but then we would come up against a 2% tax
It would
rate.
not.
Oh, it would
It
not?
would not, no. It's not a factor in that?
Yeah, there's a real big disconnect on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if, I mean, as our community, if everyone's homes prices went down by 10%, or if everyone's homes prices went up by 10%, our school budget would still try to raise the same amount of money. So it doesn't really affect the game that I know individuals see. If you were about to sell your home, interest rates do affect the mortgage. But for the tax levy that Maureen is speaking about, our tax levy will be exactly what we had last year and possibly 1%, 2%, or 3% more each year. And all of our homeowners share that revenue side obligation. I don't know if that is sort of where you were looking at.
Yeah.
My-
Oh, sorry, yes.
No, my concern is just the dynamic. If you have an entire tax roll that goes down in value, that it gets assessed lower, then I understand you have to raise
We
the same.
would still raise the exact same amount of
Yes.
money from the
Because it's
exact same
budget to
residence.
No, but the percentage increase would come up against the tax.
That would be the tax rate.
But we would need, in order to raise that money on a lower tax base,
We will benefit instead.
Yep.
So correct me if I'm wrong, if your home gets assessed lower, your tax is also lower. And so, but then the tax levy, which is school to school, increases. If it remains, let's say 2%, well, it will still be as is, but then your collective tax that you pay for school and for property and everything may be lower only because the tax rate dropped.
Right, no, you're talking about like more like
Or your
holistically
property
of
got
everybody.
assessed lower, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think if it was an individual, if someone raised their
Individual,
taxes,
correct.
yes, of course, that, but I think if you're talking about just overall, like home values just drop, what is the impact? So the impact would be that the tax rate would have to, because the tax rate calculation does look at the assessment, and also looks at what you're raising, and that's how it's calculated, what the increase would need to be. Although in that case, if everybody's value were to drop and we just spent 1% more in money, theoretically, like, you would still only, if everyone's were to drop at the same time, the increase to your taxes should only be 1%. You know what I mean? Even if the tax rate needed to be higher, per se.
And it does get back to Doreen's initial question, you know, if the public was looking at the two columns, tax rate and tax levy, almost all the years they were very similar, with the
Yeah,
few
they're- yeah.
exceptions. And what you're asking about would be an exception.
Yeah.
If we can raise the tax rate by 20%, that's not running up against the tax cap. In some years, you'll see the tax cap rate, like last year, it went negative,
Correct.
but it wasn't really related to our 2% cap number. So there really is occasionally a disconnect between those two numbers, but almost every year in those 16, they're within 0.5% of each other because we don't have extremes.
Yeah, I would say only in the last few years. I mean, it first started when we got that, which is very, highly unusual, that to get a single homeowner to, well, the first time our assessed valuation changed, which was like kind of an outlier, is having anything that would come new into a district and you would receive just like new tax dollars. So that, and then of course the reassessment has been challenging because not only was it challenging for the first, when people were getting their new assessed valuation, ever since they've done that, they're, continuously reassessing people, which, some of it is driven by our spending, some of it's driven by maybe your home has gone up significantly in value and you're picking up a bigger chunk, which we can only control is our budget. And I think that's where a lot of times when we do present, and we are required to do so, what we are estimating the tax rate to be with this proposed budget, we do have to remind, folks that we don't control the assessment or your individual assessment. And if there was either even a large commercial drop in assessed valuation in the town, everyone just by default will have a higher tax bill. And I know it's a bit confusing because I know even in the last few years, I think people's tax bills in certain circumstances went up significantly because of their reassessment, and then coupled with the budget, it's hard to sometimes parse it out.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that's what I think makes it, at least in the last few years, I think it's been even a little bit more so difficult for some.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So again, just focusing, and again, this is a very, just as a reminder, even if I were to do this probably in 2 weeks, the numbers will be a bit sharper, but looking at this, the first time in October and kind of in a very conservative fashion, playing out some of these numbers, and again, we hope, anything I want to say that I'm putting in that 22, 23 estimate end of year, I'm confident we'll receive in terms of revenues, but it could get a little better, I would say, so in certain cases, but as I mentioned, we may see that some of that solar income coming in this year, so just to kind of get a sense of where we're at, and again, now the good news is not to say there may be needs that we're, that myself or anybody here or even the principals may not even know as of yet. So, we're just kind of doing a status quo budget, maybe having a couple savings, and, but what we're really trying to do in this budget season, as we always do, is really saying that based on this model, like we really have to, like if we're considering adding, we really have to do it by either where possible, finding ways to be a little, looking at how our present way we're spending money and maybe deciding if something is a real need, we may need to shift other things to cover it, not so much just add new dollars. So, but the good news is right now, I don't know if people think it's good news to increase the budget, but even with this, we're going to have expenses that are going up. We know that, even if we don't add one more thing. So in the tax cap model, based on our revenues, and again, still using some of our own monies to balance the budget, which is the appropriated fund balance, we should, in this model, at least for next year, be within tax cap compliant, without, unless there's some unknown expenses needing to either, do any significant reductions. But you can see very quickly, even in the 24-25 year, how that projection immediately we are having shortfalls. So that's what makes it so challenging, because you have to kind of always be looking, and that's where even if we're like, oh, we'll be okay for next year, if there's things that we either can either reduce, or as we have opportunities to say is, like a couple years ago, when there's a retirement as an example, there's times we do look to say, is this something we necessarily need to replace? And if we don't, what are the impacts of that? And I think as much as sometimes it's upsetting, and everything we do, every position here, I believe has a value, everything we do, or we wouldn't be doing it. That is something we do have to do, and be comfortable that they're, that's when people can voice their concerns over those. But it is important to do that each year, because as you can see, even if we're okay for 23, 24, the following year we may not be able to, support that same number of staffing, to Jeremy's point, and state tax cap compliance. So but there are other breaks you get, like with retirements and attrition over the years, just in a reduction of costs. But, it is each year you have to kind of really be cognizant of the 5-year long-term sustainability of everything we do.
Maureen,
Yes.
quick question.
Sure.
Can you, in terms of the debt services,
Yes.
can you speak a little bit more about it in terms of the bond that we also had? Are you able to elaborate a little bit on it?
So the bond.
For the debt services?
Sure. That's on the expenditure side of the budget, right? Yeah, so we have begun to pay it back, and we'll be picking up a little bit more of the principal in the 22-23 year, and that's been accounted for in that projection. The one thing in this, again, model, when we looked at our expenditures, it doesn't necessarily capture it. I mean, one of the things that, we did spend money, but quite frankly, we didn't spend money for a very long time in this district in terms of capital infrastructure needs. And, this model right here is not contemplating any new debt, but I'll be very honest with you, I mean, we may find ourselves in a year needing to consider doing, not necessarily like huge work, but I think what we should be thinking about as part of the deliberations in the budget, just holistically, not so much as that I have any particular thing right in my mind, but I think thinking, as most districts are on at least within every 5 years, they're issuing debt, sometimes even in lesser timeframes, quite frankly. And, you know, maybe as we know the history here and why there was a time in which there was a longer period of time, which I do believe at that time I worked there, it was the right thing to do. We were kind of gearing up to do a bond in 2007, and of course, like 2008, it rolled around and we paused. And then, you know, the reason that the fields got done first, of course, was because the track anyone who was here, was completely closed. So, you know, this last 2 bonds have gotten us really in an excellent place, but we also have buildings that are very old. And, you know, one of the pieces, yes, that old bond is factored in, but we do need to consider, you know, how those capital, and I think not that that's going to be discussed tonight, but it will be discussed as we recap this last bond in the next few months. There are still some odds and ends we're sorting through. That we had architects there today. Most of the work's done, but there are some odds and ends we're closing out. That's why I can't complete. We're still in retainage.
So this is all for payback. You haven't made any wiggle room for a possible debt, right? This is just...
Yeah, this is just kind of saying what we currently are committed to, yeah. And again, I don't want to, I think that's one thing even with the capital reserve, and again, this is not so much, this is topics that we can kind of delve into, you know, on different budget. I think it's a very good thing to bring up, Dr. Lang, because I think to your point, or as I think about the budget, I think, you know, there's the labor, but there are the infrastructure things. There are the keeping up with the, you know, physical facilities that we have to also always be keeping in mind. So currently, I'm showing you kind of a projection, as I said, based upon what's going on now. We have the debt. We're right now in the process of updating our 5-year facilities plan, which is a requirement that we have to submit to the state. Within that, there may be things we're like, you know, in 4 years, we may need to do X. I mean, it shows you there are still things. We're in great shape. You know, the building's not going to fall down, but there are things that, just like in our own homes, like, oh my gosh, now those windows are 10, you know, or we have univentilators. I'm like, oh, didn't we just do those? They're like, Maureen, we did them in 1998. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, so, you know, even in the last bond when we did it, because it took so long with COVID, we're really like, almost 5 years removed from that. You know what I mean? Like when and it actually, we started that bond process 7 years ago, you know, to get it to vote. So it is going to be an important part that as we look at our 5-year projections, when we've tightened up and gotten those 5-year facilities projections, which include infrastructure, but also maybe needs that we think we may need to either renovate, possibly, you know, that'll be part of this conversation, because you're going to need to know that, okay, well, like, that's great, but in a few years, we may need to spend another few hundred. So, and also, it'll help us really look at, as we may have some monies come available, the importance of allocating those to the capital reserve fund. As you know, we're currently in the process of looking at a drainage project that could wipe that whole reserve out. And that's something that is not, you know, there's things that happen. I mean, and I think we do have to also factor that in. We can't act as though that's not something we should allot some money for. So, but again, as we get into that facilities planning document, that'll really help inform how that fits into this budget.
Okay.
Okay. So, sorry. Yeah.
No, I just want to see if there's any, what sort of, from this snapshot, what are the next steps? I guess you're going to get to that here.
I'm just going to go and then we're done, and then
okay.
We can kind of, what I was thinking. So again, not that we're going to go over this line by line. Again, just an understanding, I mean, state aid, and we're very grateful and thankful that in the last few years, we have seen significant increases. We know in the last couple of years, we know that's been driven solely by COVID aid, that's been driven to states. And, you know, I think that's something that all of my colleagues, I think we've been told that those projections of those dollars will remain. You know, I think I've been around long enough to know they say that, but they can take your money away from you. So I think, that's also something, although it's their second leading revenue source, so any change in those numbers is significant for us. A 10% decrease, we saw that a few years ago, even 10% less state aid is a significant issue for us because, $500,000 is a hard gap to close. So kind of looking at where we've been and even during the years, which doesn't show here, the gap elimination aid that was in place in post-2007, we had millions of dollars taken away from us. So that even though they gave it to us saying this is funded, we never actually got a lot. I mean, and it was never to be paid back. So it's an area where we do keep a lot of our, focus on. And again, this is not, this is just a little bit of a breakdown. Again, it's captured on the other slide, but if there were any questions, I mean, one of the projections that we know is going to be way up this year, now for this current year is of course interest, because we all know the interest rate's going up. It's bad for when you're buying a home, but it's great because our estimated end of year in these particular lines is going to be significantly up. I can remember when the district used to receive $200,000 a year in interest. So, that we're expecting to see continue rise. So that's a good thing, especially because we have a bond in place and we don't have to borrow money. So that's good. And again, this is just again the breakdown. This is part of our budget book, and just had it there just more for reference, not to go through line by line. And then again, how do we develop our budget? This is a slide that we've used in previous budget 101s. And again, this is just a snapshot of process. It's so funny, I was reading just some of my boring finance magazines that school district people like myself receive. And all of the practices we use, that is the practices. I mean, people are like, there is a zero-based budgeting. What that means is not that you throw out the whole thing. You have teachers and enrollment, but you do kind of look at everything critically, especially, you contemplate, could you have higher class sizes? It's not as though we don't do that, but typically where the board, what is presented to the board, and maybe these are discussions we can have well before you get your proposed budget, is kind of contemplating kind of, philosophy around some of these things because they do have a large impact on the budget. And again, just of course, enrollment, like contracts, benefits, the needs assessment. This year, I think the portrait of, do I have that somewhere? Oh yeah, I do have a portrait of learner and the strategic planning. Around that, I think that where I've seen it work well here with the strategic plan really does help align, because again, we talk about budget is an articulation of your values and what it helps you focus your resources where people collectively think they should be, focused. So these are what we do consider as we look at building our budget. And again, there are some things that are unfunded mandates, and some of them are not that costly, some are more costly, and many of them we would do anyway. But just as an example, those are things we do consider when we build our budget that we do not have a lot of control over.
One of the interesting ones here, is like the enrollment, because we do have a certain number of housing in Hastings. What are we, 2.2 square miles or something? So you can't go up very much.
Well, it could, because the majority of households in Hastings are the people who live in them don't have children. So if there was like a 10% turnover in the housing, where you saw like a large exodus of seniors, which maybe you won't if, now say with the other part of the budget agenda today, the senior, I mean, that's why some people are incentivized to try to keep seniors, because it keeps less children in the district. So people sometimes do it for that reason. But, Hastings and Dobbs Ferry are unique in the river towns where they have more of our housing in Dobbs and in Hastings is occupied by people sometimes who never even had children in the district, where Ardsley actually I think has like less housing stock or a lot lower overall population, but more students in the school district. by like 400 or 500, you know, it's like, I think they're 2,100, we're like 1,600. So that being said, if there were to be more homes, it's just always been a unique aspect of Hastings. Irvington and Ardsley have much higher homeowners with children. Yeah, so that's why I think that the population actually we could probably have 2,000. So, I mean, like there'd have to be a considerable turnover in housing.
Right. And so if the town, the village wanted to build additional housing,
Mhm.
there should be a conversation about, will we at least get the same amount that we had per student in taxes in order to fund it at a zero rate, you know what I mean? And I don't think that we get involved in those discussions with the town, but the village, but I think
Mhm.
it's something to consider
Mhm.
as those discussions might
Yeah.
move forward.
Yeah, I mean, historically, there have been times where they will request, I mean, I don't know what's being when there have been things that are like at the point of where there may be a real offer or something, there have been times, I can't remember, I remember just when Gab Lester, that's how I'm kind of remembering. I remember us doing, like, there was an analysis given to us that, and just kind of, that was, like, we were looking at what the impact would be for us. And, you know, like most, especially if it's a development, developers will always use, like, numbers where they're like, no, you'll get, like, 3 kids, and you're like, why? You know, no one's buying these. So, you know, I think that, to your point, I think we do try to keep we have a good dialogue that we do communicate well with the village. So I think if there's something that would be seriously on the docket, we would definitely weigh in at that time with that. And it seems as though in a lot of places, including recently in Tarrytown, a lot of developers, that's what they do look to put in is housing. And it's challenging for the school, you know, schools, because it's great, you know, you want the kids, but it's just, we also have to plan for it and make sure we can, you know, have the space. And the money, it typically does not work, where the money you receive is typically not going to, or it may be like a wash, but maybe not help, you know.
But as you were talking about that, I mean, it may be, enrollment hasn't really been a driver for us in the past, or new enrollment. If we look back, you know, we're about 20 students lower than our 2017 number. Mm-hmm. So maybe, you know, is this an unusually steady, you know, 5-year period, or is Hastings typically seeing about 70 homes sold? You know, it's something that I guess we use to develop and think about budgets, but we have been pretty much at 1650, 1670 with the students that left and came back maybe from remote schooling. But if it changed, that would be a challenge for sure, that the village trustees and the school board would try to be on the same page on, I guess is what you were talking about? Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, we are definitely higher than we were, like, even when I first started, I think there was like 1,100 students. I mean, granted, I've been here a long time, but it's just, because I'm getting so, it's scary because of my age more than anything. But interestingly, sometimes when I look at it, I'm like, my God, we only 1,100 students back there. Like, it is interesting, because that is like a significant growth in terms of like our, you know, 500 students is pretty big, or 400 or 500. So we have been kind of, you know, been at that 16, as Jeremy said, 1,700 number. I think even 10 years ago we were at like 1,300. So I mean, we may be just kind of, now maybe we will level out at this number. But if there were to be any large turnover in housing, we could potentially see a big uptick in, not a big, but an uptick. So. But, you know, here where sometimes even a few students make us, especially at the elementary, is sort of where we're like, do we break a section or not? Sometimes even 5 or 6, or depending where they come in, has made us either increase a teacher. So it's sometimes not even the total of the number, but where we're seeing them come in that sometimes breaks sections. So even in those, we do keep our eye and really close track of those projections. Okay. again, just a reminder of our internal budget calendar. As I had mentioned, that we kind of put together our internal, or I put together an internal document that goes out to the department and building leaders. And this year I tried to kind of, just to kind of help the budget conversations. And so as we meet with all the different folks, that there's a little bit more, detail we're kind of looking at as we look at even existing program, giving some kind of feedback and evaluation, and kind of then what they're projecting. So those will be in their hands by the 14th. And again, this is just their internal, they're given this internal timeline, and this is the timeframes. Occasionally there'll be a few days here and there difference, but this is necessary in order for us to get our a budget together to present to the board, or the proposed budget. And, I'm sorry. And again, so this is not to say that you have to select any of these. These are just kind of just throwing out a couple things that may be areas in which you want to dig into a bit more. And again, these are anything you can add. These are just some of the thinking. And again, you look at when I say enrollment projections, to Jeremy's point, it's not like they're significantly different, but kind of looking at what those breakdowns are, and because the class size, this is connected to like the class size review, quite frankly. And in the last 4 or 5 years, we have been running a little bit lower at the kindergarten and some of those levels where, we could kind of look at, and that'll help us determine where we should be budgeting our staffing numbers to be, because some of that is based upon like some of these lower threshold numbers, and again, your comfort level around being up a little bit. And I think those things are best for us to look at early, so by the time we've kind of created all the budget, that we know where the board would be comfortable at with those numbers if we were to tweak them. So I don't know, other than the ones that we've put here, and again, the 5-year long-term facilities needs is going to be, it has to be part of it, because I do think without that, it's hard to, maybe we should have been doing that even with the bond a little bit more so people are kind of contemplating, there may be a couple facilities needs the district will have to address in the upcoming years, and should we be then thinking maybe we shouldn't be adding these other things to the budget and thinking of those expenses.
Okay.
So that's, I think,
all right.
that's different.
Thank you. I think with some of the meetings you have with buildings and departments in November, December, some of these suggested topics get fleshed out a lot more, so it's
Thank you.
probably come up.
You're welcome. But I think we're also looking for the board if there were anything as we plan and prepare. I mean, there's some of them that we can kind of bring back some things we think may be important, and then either you can give us some areas you want to look at now.
Yeah, I mean, what we want to do is, because we've built in time ahead of bringing you in February that submitted budget, and so we're trying to do, and we've blocked in time over the next several meetings we don't want to present, again, we want to have a discussion, and we set the stage here budget topics, so whether it's right now, but soon come back and say, here's some things we think about that February moment when you're bringing us the budget, things we need better understanding of. I might suggest you set the enrollment to the side. I think the bigger issue is changing student needs. I mean, that's what's the driver on cost. It could be what's the portrait going to bring to us, and I don't want to get ahead of the next topic for you, but it is to update you more with the portrait process. But it would be just saying, of these big areas, right? You don't have a lot of time as a board, so we want to focus on what are those big swing areas. I got to better understand that for the budget and the budget process. So that's the guidance we're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, that I think might be interesting is this idea of class size review, because I think we all feel intuitively that the smaller class size the better, right? But I remember it got brought up last year at the budget meeting. I mean, when I'm trying to think of what we can impact the most, I mean, the drivers of our budget, one of them is staffing. It's a huge part of our budget, and so I think the class size review is interesting to really understand what happens when you increase the class size. You can't it's not and we have looked at everything, and that's the only really thing that I can think of as a way to change the budget. I don't know how the other colleagues feel.
Yeah, I think I sort of have an idea of what you are getting at, because if you look at our 55 million, 43 is really salaries and employee benefits. I've not even added the 1 million from special ed, so probably 44. So it's only 11 million that is not even just going to programs. 11 million is going to everything else. So I think that, I mean, if I'm sitting, which I'm not, thank God, but if I'm sitting in that decision space alone, the only thing is evaluating as retirements are happening, right? When teachers' retirements are happening, because you really don't want to send people hungry home. So when retirements are happening, we are very intentional about, like you said, older, like high schools and stuff like that, you know, we may need to start creating that little, being intentional in the same way that we are projecting the budget 5 years, we project it that way, and be intentional at being cost savers towards that. One of the suggested, so this is just to add to what you were saying, but one of the suggested topics that I would love, and it may not be immediate, is about special ed. We all know that the last budget, special ed in the community was not really understood with the charges, like, oh, special ed is causing a drive. I did my own calculations here, and I would love for us to disaggregate that a little bit more, only because from this rough estimate that I did, with the 44 million versus the 1 million, or even the 3 million, right? If we have roughly, we have 1640 is the student body, so roughly 1700. And then out of that 1700, we have 200 and something, which is roughly 300 as special ed. So it means we are having 1400, quote and unquote, let me just use the term general ed and special ed, which I'm cringing at doing this, but so we have 1400 general ed and 300 special ed. 1400, starting with the special ed, the 300 means one person is roughly $10,000. And then if you do the 44 million for the 1400, it's roughly 30,000 per student. Now, but I'm not, so now you're looking at one gen ed student having to get 30,000, and then out of that 3 million, you are getting one special ed getting 10,000. But of course, the special ed also benefits to some extent what the general ed is benefiting. So if you look at it, they are really not getting a lot. If you look at it very closely, because then there's left with 20,000 more that they are supposed to have access to if you are keeping things equal.
I mean,
right?
I think, no, and I hear you. I think what
You
that
hear what I'm saying,
well,
right?
I think it underscores we should probably find a way to highlight special ed.
Disaggregate.
Well, highlight what's going on in special ed, because the reality is, per federal law, least restrictive environment and inclusion is the way. So the vast majority of the students, except in several cases, are fully in the
gen ed,
mix in
yeah.
gen ed.
Yeah,
So
ICTs,
it's
Yeah.
you know, you have some classes, as you know, and others know here well, where it would be full on, but otherwise it's a highly inclusive,
Yeah.
integrated environment. So I think more generally, if the board's saying we want to better understand special ed, because that was a big topic last year.
Correct.
Every public ed entity is dealing with a big topic when you hit the budget. And you want to get into it in a way that doesn't divide a community.
Correct.
And so anything you could think as a board, and maybe through next meeting, say, here's some ways we might better understand.
That
If
would be
it's-
helpful.
if it's
Yeah,
without getting individual students, if
Right.
it's that financial analysis, but kind of review how that all is arrived at,
Yeah,
if that helps.
because some of the-
If it's staffing
Correct.
issues, just,
Yeah, and I think to
It's
your point, I think,
understanding it
you know,
more.
internally, and I think we can try to disagree. I mean, I think there's the numbers and there's also like what occurs, right? So, you know, a lot of parents, even I think the parent last week, when they were presenting the special ed information at the last meeting,
Yeah.
the ICT classes, which even my children, just not as a special ed student, have been in, you know, there are staffing there that would be picked up in the special education portion of the budget, but I think anyone whose child has been in one could recognize that they do benefit from the additional
The
staffing in
overall.
there, and I think many of them would suggest that even the station teaching, that all children are benefiting. So I think sometimes there's, like, we can break down the numbers that also speak to some of it, although it is captured in one area of the budget, there are these other, you know, there, other students are also participating in those. So I think there's, like, the actual, we can break it down a bit more and give a bit more understanding that it is at least, like, a lot of the, even the special ed staffing is in general education spaces where all of our students are benefiting from
Yeah.
it, including
Yeah,
the teacher assistants who are incredibly helpful in helping our schools function and, you know,
Yeah,
for
I
both
want
gen
to,
ed and
yeah, I
special
want
ed.
to clean this up because I'm not sure if Dr. Mackenzie had gotten. So to your point, is the community divide, to your point, is not what, is why I'm asking for this, because you see something on Facebook, I go on Facebook, I'm sorry, but I do. And it's like, oh, too much money for special ed, right? You know, there's this blanket statement with no meaning behind it. And the assumption is that it's too much extra. And it's really not extra. It's really not a favor. It's actually what is due to every child, just like a special ed child. And if you look at the numbers, it's actually the same. It's not like, it's like extra 3 million, extra this, extra, you know, and again, we can't talk to the management of the operational part. So the administration is saying that assistant director is needed. I personally was thinking otherwise, but I trust that operational work. And then the assumption is extra, as if, you know, and when you look at it closely, it's really not, as you said, you know, it's like we just need to separate that amount because the federal
Yeah, we're required to do
it's
so.
a requirement.
Yeah,
And
so
so
that's
it's
the
not, it's
topic.
no special treatment. I mean, I really want
Yeah,
to
I mean, I
emphasize that
think
because
you'll
I
even
know
see
what
that,
I'm hearing.
sorry, this year, it's even further reporting that is even required around the ENL, ELL staffing, which was, again, if you look at that, actually in isolation for the amount of ELL students, it's a very expensive per student, but all of these things are required we are required
It's
to, like, break
mandated.
down things a bit, yeah, so a lot of it also is driven, like, you know, whether, and unfortunately, that's because I guess the thinking is if it wasn't mandated, people wouldn't do it. But
Yeah, I
I
mean-
think we can break it, we can
Yeah,
get into
and
more
there's a
the
lot of
numbers.
threads there, so
Yes.
let's tee that up in
Yes,
one way or
of
another
course.
for once we get more information to it. All right, Maureen, thank you.
So
Thank
on a macro level, if you wanted to know, you know, where I would be coming from as a board member, is that I'm very happy seeing 5-year predictions, and if state aid goes up 10% next year, it certainly makes it a lot easier to come in at our 2% tax levy. It certainly disappears after that. As you know, our community should be aware, you know, our newest contract with our administrator, our building level principals and certain, not really departments, but areas we gave, you know, we agreed, 5, 6, 7% increases for certain areas of our administration. Our teachers, our contract cost goes up 5% every year. And our you know, the one we most recently voted on was more 3% and 4% for certain non-union administrators. So on a macro level, from the board, I feel that most of our budget is probably going up 5% a year. I see it in benefits. We all know benefits are probably going up 5% a year. Our stock market is flat for 2 years, so pension contributions are going to be coming from our residents to support it. I don't see it reflected in the this budget. We found a way to pass it. The community did, and the administrators found something that was very well supported. Next year, it seems like if state aid goes up and we hit these numbers, Maureen, it looks like we're well within our expected tax levy. So from a board view, I feel like most of our budget is somewhat not matching up with where I'm going to be in 2 years. And I hope to be proven wrong on that. But I know that 5% for teachers and administrators and 5% for benefits has to eventually come out to 5% in revenue. Last year, we were able to use some money from rollover reserves, and we kept the tax rate at 2%. My concerns would only be if we're hitting at 5% numbers. I don't think that's a level the community would easily support. But if it's not going to be 5% growth, then I think supporting all of the needs of our students, our special ed students, our regular ed students, our enrichment students, our music, our sports is all fabulous. And then we can continue being blue ribbon schools. But if the 5% numbers somehow pop up, either by March or by next March, I think that's where we have challenges. I don't think we have challenges at 2.5%. So, am I?
And I know we want to move the topic, but I'd like us to think on Jeremy's question, because having worked with a lot of boards, that it gets very incremental, and then the board says, while it's incremental year to year, we can give you some guidance. Administration is roughly a growth range. And I just heard you do that. I heard you say, if you're staying closer to 2, I'm comfortable. If you're eking up to 5, I'm going to get concerned. Now, you as a board, as a group of 7, may not want to have that conversation, but I think it's worth having the conversation about whether or not you want to have it. Because certain boards around the tri-state region give that guidance. We're not going to give you specific percent growth, but approximate. We don't want to see something more than this. So given the internal work that's underway and the work that Maureen is incredibly rigorous with everyone that comes before her, trust me, is to say there's probably not the appetite for X percent, right? We didn't really have that guidance last year. Nobody did anything wrong. I'm just saying, just think on that. And I know we want to move on to other agenda items, so I'm putting it out as a future question to get answered, if I'm being clear.
Yeah, fair,
right?
fair. So that's some guidance for next time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with kind of putting those parameters, particularly where I think it was 23, 24 is when we're going to hit shortfalls, right? So
24, 25.
24, 25. So that's where I think we would have a good conversation around.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. So we're going to move on to consider, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. We're going to move on to a report for Dr. McCursey, our superintendent.
Yeah, and what we did tonight to give you as a board energy on the budget, the work on the blue ribbon, was to move all of the typical verbal reports into a written format. So thank you, Gus and Ileana, for doing that. I did that, Melissa did that. Having said that, we do now want to talk a little bit about the portrait process, where we are. And I know Gus was about to leave. I gave him the freeze sign since he's a member of the core group. And so Melissa's going to do that with you in some detail. The front end of my written report that's in there and does for the public reviews that the public statement we've had. We had a really good core group process, and a week ago it said we're aiming for a date soon. We're going to tell you tonight we're aiming for December 6th, that board meeting, to bring you a fairly comprehensive update, nothing final because it's iterative and in process, but Melissa will speak to you about that a bit, about where we are. And we're not reporting out fully tonight. No, that's December 6th. But it's really important we update that. And we'll have to plan the December 6th meeting well, so that gets plenty of space and time.
Yeah.
So, Melissa?
So as we move towards a more comprehensive report to the board, wanted to provide a brief overview this evening. So we're currently gathering additional feedback from various groups based on what the core Portrait of a Hastings Learner group created, which was a draft of our portrait statement, proposed goals, the actual Portrait of a Hastings Learner, and values. So we're especially seeking student feedback at this time through 3 different focus groups. So we're working with the student union, with HASP, and with the high school affinity group. And additionally, we're working hard through the core group and thankful to be receiving additional feedback and input on what was created. So there were some subgroups working within that larger group, and additional information and comments and feedback coming back from that team. So on the 6th, we'll be sharing with you the draft of our portrait statement, draft proposed goals, draft portrait of a Hastings learner, and the process for identifying and moving ahead with 18-month action steps that are tied to the 3 goals that have been developed.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Szymanski. Moving on.
Can you give me updates from the board?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear either of you, actually. I'm sorry. Dr. Lang?
Okay, no, I was saying that the board, were part of the core, yourself and Doug and Sylvia, any updates from your end?
I haven't
Processing.
haven't processed it in just yet, but happy to meet. Yeah.
Okay.
Doreen.
I just have a quick request on the district page for Portrait of a Hastings Learner. Can we just have put there the schools that the teachers belong to?
In the core group listing?
Yeah. It just says teacher. It doesn't
Yeah,
say
we
what
can
school
we can
they're
fill
at.
that out pretty fast. It's representative intentionally, so you had all 3 schools.
Yeah, I just think the community might like to know.
Yeah, it was quite intentional, representative of both.
Right.
And any work going forward, because there will be some work groups as we'll talk about on the 6th, those work groups would be quite representative of the 3. But we can definitely add that in. I don't know, Melissa, do you, if you want to kick a note, or we can just fix it, right? Yeah, no, that's a great point,
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Doreen.
because it is a strongly representative process.
Yeah, it was, for sure. Moving on, we would have our student report, which Gus has posted into the board docs, right? That's
Correct.
his notes at the bottom there. Yeah, and he left. Moving on to public comment. There isn't anybody present. So we're going to move on to business items. Are there any questions or comments about business items 1 through 13? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 13?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just did
Oh,
regarding the calendar. So I know that we had,
that's item 6, yeah.
yeah, I know that we had, this is the budget calendar.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. I misunderstood.
That's okay. Next in business, under B, there's a resolution that's been prepared to consider raising the maximum income level of eligible senior citizens. So this would be sort of an additional tax exemption based upon income. So are we voting to pass this tonight? Okay. And we talked about this last week.
So I'd
Jeremy,
like
I'm
to
sorry.
speak on it again, because I don't think I was very persuasive last time. But we will have a motion to bring this up for a vote, and if there's enough people, if there's 2 people want to motion it, then I guess we're going to have a vote on it. I believe this is the wrong move for our board, and I know it's completely an unpopular stance to try to tell seniors with low income that you're not supporting something that came down from the state. So to the 5 of you, I'll say this. I believe this has been rushed in a political year to make a stance here. And what I'd like to pull out of this, why I don't want to support a motion to even vote on it, is that we do not raise our levy based on income. It's just, it's apples to oranges here. We don't ask people to tell us their income, and that's how you support the schools. We don't ask people to give us your total wealth, and then we do a percent based on your total wealth. What our state does is we raise tax revenue for schools from one asset, the value of your home. So it seems strange to have an income level exemption when it has nothing to do with how we raise money, which is why it possibly hasn't come up for 15 years.
We have one income level exception. It's called Enhanced Star. And anybody in this community who makes less than $90,000 and is over 65 qualifies possibly for Enhanced Star. But other than that, this is how we support our schools. It's based on the value of your home. So I don't see why we're giving an exemption based on income. If you have a $1 million home, you tend to give more than $25,000 to the school. It doesn't matter if you have 10 kids in that home or if you've never sent a kid to school. So I'm uninspired by this proposal that came down from Albany. It is income level, which has nothing to do with how we tax our residents. We raise residents based on, are you in a $200,000 apartment or a $1.5 million home? We have two types of exemptions. Basic Star, which is for families, anybody living in the home. It's against renters. You don't get it if you're a renter. And if you make less than $500,000, you get Basic Star. We have Enhanced Star for seniors making less than $90,000. This seems to be something they threw out that's not well understood how it's going to impact our budget. And it's a small increase, so I can see why people might want to just put a motion to vote on it and then pass it. But it doesn't make sense to me. Income is not how we ask our community to pay. We don't ask the wealthy incomers to pay more. We just say, where do you live? Everybody in this town, whether you have any kids or no kids, you're going to pay this. And I'm fine continuing it exactly how it is. Where do you live? What's the value of your home? Please support our community. Our school is the biggest part of our community. So if you guys put a motion for it, I'll be voting no. And that's my reasoning. If there's enough people who think that it shouldn't even be a motion, then we won't even have to vote no, because voting no on an income level like this is going to look absurd.
Yeah, no, you first.
I just have a question based off of what you're saying, Jeremy. My understanding of this is that it already exists as a way of getting money. It's just that we're raising the base.
I agree with that. It already exists. It hasn't been touched in a whole lot of years. It's been proposed to change it, and communities are. It already exists at a level of, if your income is this, you should get 50% off of your assessment. And it would still continue to exist whether we do nothing. This proposal is saying, let's go from a.
Didn't you say that this isn't the way that we tax people, that we ask for money from them, so we shouldn't do it, but it is the way we, am I not understanding it?
Yeah, correct.
Maybe you're speaking, it's not how we do it, no.
It applies to only
We
a
have
small fraction of the people.
It has nothing, we only ask, what is the value of where you live?
But this,
And then
this
there,
proposal already
People
exists.
are currently getting it. and
There
under
is an
the
ex-
old- the old chart.
there is an exemption to the one way we raise money from our community, which is, where do you live, what's the value of where you live?
Nope, but I mean, there are currently like 50 people who get it with what exists
Enhanced.
currently, which is that up to 37,000.
Right, so we're not being asked to find a new way of
We're
raising
changing
money.
the values.
We're just finding, this is.
We're expanding the number of people who are eligible based on their
Yeah.
income. That's all
Am
that
I not
it is.
understanding? I didn't think that was what you said, though.
I don't think that's what I said at all. We raise money based on the value of your home with a couple of exemptions. An exemptions for veterans, an exemption for income level below 37,
Right, that's
an
this.
exempt. That's this. And raising this is just deciding that you believe we shouldn't be, that it's going to be deflected in another way. Instead of we don't ask for income levels. We don't tax people more who make more.
But we do if it's 37,000, right?
Yes. If your income is below 90,000,
Yeah, so we look at income.
Yeah.
That's what Doreen is saying.
I know. If your income's below 90,000, and you're above 65,
So we vote on
you don't
income.
pay
Sorry.
based on
Tax
where
on
you
income.
live at the same, you get a discount.
Right.
And if you are above 65 and you have income below 37, you also have an exemption.
So it's not
I'm
just
fine.
property
I'm
value,
fine
it's
with
income
it
too.
being how it is. We raise money based on where the value of your home, and I don't see a need to change this exemption from 37 to 57. We don't look at income in many ways except for exceptions like this. I don't see why it needs to be raised in that sense.
Why don't you feel like there needs to be an inflation-based increase to this?
Say it again?
Why don't you think that there needs to be an inflation-based increase to this? Or maybe I'm not using the right word, inflation. We looked at it the last time and I saw that the 37,000 in, whenever it was
Like present
2007,
value, yeah.
is the present value of the money exactly, is the same as 50, I think I estimated it as like 55,000 today. So it's
Okay.
not really
There would be two answers. Why do I think that it's never occurred in the last 15 years? Because I don't see that this is related to how we tax our residents. Every year before this, it stayed at 37. And I believe that you can choose as a New York State or as a community to support your schools. You can support your schools based on income, or you can support your schools based on total wealth, or you can support your schools based on one asset wealth, homes. Our communities we benefit a lot by the fact that they do it based on local wealth. That's why we spend $35,000 per student and our cities don't. I just think it's as it has been for the last 15 years. We don't need an inflation adjustment because the truth is we ask for a commitment based on the value of your home. So carving out all these exemptions to that seems contrary to me.
Yeah.
So I
If
have
you
a
live in a $1 million home and have no kids, lots of income, no income, we ask you to contribute to your community schools based on that asset. I don't really understand the reasoning for these exemptions. If you live in a $500,000 home, you support our schools at a lower amount. If you live in a $200,000 home, you support your community school at a lower amount. I feel it's already built in without these exemptions.
But we do look at the cost of living increases when we consider salaries for all of the people who work here. So looking at cost of living increases is baked into how we develop budgets. So why should it not be on the other side, how we get money?
If I can summarize a little bit, I think what Jeremy's saying is, we're opening up a bit of a dynamic change. This exists, but it applies to a small section of people. And this is almost like an alternative minimum tax, where we're raising something and it's going to apply to a larger number of people. We can definitely say it's going to apply to a larger number of people, but we can't actually say what the number is or what the revenue effect will be. I think that's, am I capturing a little of your discomfort there?
I understand. I understand what he's saying. I understand that if we raise it, it's going to affect
Yeah,
more people.
that's
But I'm
simple.
wondering why that doesn't seem right to you, because say in 2007 it was 37,000 and that affected, I'm making these numbers up, it was 50 people, right? As time goes on and 37,000 doesn't mean the same amount, it's affecting less and fewer
And they are in
fewer
fixed
fewer
income,
people,
yeah.
right? So today we're left with 15 people. But if we went back up to where it was, we'd be back to where historically this was meant to cover.
Correct.
Am I, do you
Correct.
understand what
It
I'm
makes
saying?
sense to me, yeah. And
It seems like you're trying to
I
say
know,
we're trying to capture the
What do
same
I?
people.
Correct.
It's just changed. The
cost.
category has just
Correct.
changed
We've
because time
lost-
has changed, so
People
like,
have lost
right.
out on this because money is not worth
Right.
the same today as it was 15 years ago. I'm not saying I agree with this
Yep.
proposal.
I'm just saying I don't agree with the proposal 15 years ago. I don't agree with it now. If we're going to raise money based on the value of your home, that seems an unfair way to do it for the state, but that's how we do it. It benefits Hastings, it hurts Yonkers. That's why our students get more money out of our community. It's not based on income.
I understand.
It's
But you
based.
don't like this law at all.
I don't
anyway,
s-
And so there's no reason to make it easier for people to access it because you don't feel that this is the way we should be dealing with it.
I feel there's a lot of people who deserve exemptions. You could give an exemption to people that have no kids in the school. You could give an exemption to people that have less income. You could give an exemption for people who make under 100 grand and a 10% exemption for people who make under 200 grand, another 10% for people who make under 300 grand. We don't do that. We don't get into any of
That
that.
is
All we say
confusing.
is support your community based on one asset class.
But do you feel that this would help keep seniors in the district, which is what we've always talked about is important for us? And it also helps seemingly in the long run
Yes.
for Maureen because they're not leaving, so more kids are
No
coming
kids
to the
enrollment,
district. So we're
mhm.
actually helping us in some way by not raising enrollment.
Yeah,
Dr. Lang, Sorry. you're waiting.
thank you.
Yeah, it seems like we've been pretty steady on the
It's
number of
okay,
homes
it's okay,
that
it's
sell.
okay.
60 homes sell,
I'm
50 homes
erasing
sell.
most of what I wanted to say.
Where our seniors are living, if they are in apartment values of 200,000 with enhanced star at 90,000 income with basic star for living there's a lot of ways to cut up the pie, and we don't try to game the system. The community supports schools. You have your kids and you go to private school, you pay the same. You have no kids, you pay the same. You make $1 million or $600,000 or $100,000, you pay based on your home. I don't see why we're adjusting it like you explained. Yes.
Thank you. I know I wanted to, last week I wanted to understand Jeremy's perspective, so but I have some clarifying questions, which I believe that you are more knowledgeable about it. So my first question is, this is just going to expand, this is just changing the amount. Everything stays the same, correct? So there is no new law per se. It's just that the amount is just changing to cover more. Okay.
That's what they're proposing, like whether we adopt a new table, because we currently are using the older table.
Okay, so that's how I understand it. It's not something new that is being proposed. It's just expanding it to cover more, because to cover with inflation and stuff like that. So that's how I'm understanding it. So I don't see the relevance with income versus home value dynamics, because this is something that is already there, and it's not a new proposal that is changing anything. It's just expanding it. Okay. My second, again, when I come here, I don't have any set, my mind is not made up, and I'll follow with what we collectively think. Another thing that I want to clean in my head now is, I don't think people paying rent actually pay taxes. Renters, they don't, correct.
The rent they pay, the homeowner
Pays the taxes. So I wanted to, so if someone has a property that is $1 million and they decide to say, okay, snap, I'm an old person, I have fixed income, let me rent all my whatever out, we will have increased enrollment.
They would be owner occupied though.
There'll be what?
For the law only applies to
You have to live
a
there.
senior citizen who occupies the
Who
unit.
are single occupants?
Yes.
Not
So-
with people, okay,
Well, I don't know
good.
single occupants, I'm sorry, but they have to live in the property.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying they are living in the property and they decide to maybe rent some parts of it because it's a $1 million huge house, like Jeremy's saying. So then it will still be, it will be increased enrollments, but then
Well, if their
the tax
income
would be
go
the
up,
same.
They wouldn't get the exemption.
oh, the income, okay, because again, you are the income part will not, okay. And then lastly, what is the real difference, you may not have the answer, to if we should adopt this to like how many people are we looking at if the village has it, and how much extra are we going to pay those that
So-
like will have to take that burden?
again, this was an estimate provided to me because we do not have that information, that type of information available to us. But one of the things we looked at was the amount of people eligible, to Jeremy's point, that are either be below that $90,000 threshold with a star, and looking at, knowing that there's more people eligible for that, so knowing you're going to pick up some folks there, and then based upon the town of Greenberg, who also is adopting, or who already has adopted this, which again, much smaller money, it's for them to kind of to provide this shift. They were suggesting we, at the most, they think was like 60 more people that would be eligible under this. I think there was 30, so I think I have the numbers.
In Hastings, you mean?
In Hastings.
Okay.
So I think it was like going from 30 to 90 or something. They're, again, just based upon, they're kind of just looking at some factors and looking at the senior star, and again, not everyone who gets senior star, because again, to Jeremy's point, it is a higher threshold, so there could be people that exceed it, would be eligible, and there may be some exemptions that are under one that, meaning the types of income counted may be different. I think all of these programs, to Jeremy's point, are not perfect. I think that is the challenge, because it doesn't necessarily count in other assets that may, you would think potentially could. The one thing with this, and I'm not saying people wouldn't apply for it, but it isn't just given to you. Similar to START, you have to apply for it to receive it. And I guess there could be seniors that, that's who they think the pool of eligibility may be. Whether everyone opts in, you don't know whether they will. I would imagine you would, but occasionally people don't. If they had a lot of other wealth, maybe they wouldn't. I'm not sure, but.
I mean,
My last question is, if we decide, do we have a chance to vote maybe for or against next year?
So, you mean, can you repeal it? So I think you can, so I believe, my understanding is in the past,
I
it
don't
was
know.
something that I guess like the veterans, like it does mean once you vote, I'm just using that as an example. I think once you voted in, it may continue until you decide to eliminate that exemption. And it may take, everything with the town of Greenberg, it would typically take it just has to do with the taxing cycle, would take an additional kind of year. It would take a year to get it to start and probably a year to get it to stop, like if you were to decide
But
against
that
it.
option remains.
Yeah, I
There's
believe you
okay.
can repeal it. I would have to confirm that, but most of these things I think can be, unlike STAR, which is the state's program, this would be, I believe, under the control of the district.
I only ask that because with my colleague talking about, all these different programmings and maybe it shouldn't have or should have, I'm just thinking that if we look at it more from a bird's view, like see all those different things and see what really makes sense for us to support and vote for, versus just saying no only because we've given freebies to too many people, and then now we are letting other people suffer because we thought we gave too many freebies out. So I'm just thinking that maybe we can look at it more critically, what it is that we've just given out, as you are saying, and what can we pull back and what can we just really do, because it's something that makes sense for us to be supportive in the eye of inflation, like Doreen had mentioned. So I just wanted to put that out there.
yeah, my view,
That's it.
I'll try to be succinct. I think the moral hazard issue is a real one. I find it, to your point, if the state wanted to pass this, they should pass it as a law, essentially. It's sort of an odd thing to fall on a school board. And I think what we shouldn't forget is that, this is shifting costs. So, if we pass this, we are shifting the costs onto the other residents in the town, including residents who might earn these same amounts, right? But don't, because of the age, they don't fall under this.
Okay.
So, given the lack of visibility in the data, we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't really know how many people it affects. I would be a no on this right now. I'd like to get to a yes on it, but I think it's the sort of thing where looking and seeing what actually happens in a year in another town, because we'll have another opportunity to pass it, to me makes more sense. I'm uncomfortable with the moral hazard aspect of it, and that we would, sort of, this becomes a precedent for why we pass an additional, where things get handed down to school boards to pass additional exemptions, and it becomes a sort of, financial gerrymandering of the district, which I'm uncomfortable with. So I would agree with Jeremy. I would be a no on this right now.
Thank you. I'll take one more stab at it as well, but no, I'll wait for you.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I feel uncomfortable with this
Okay.
whole thing. I don't know why we're being asked to do it. I feel like you should either have put it, the government should do it, or you should put it to a vote for the
All right.
entire community, but why they're asking
Correct,
us,
yeah.
it's completely
It's such-
unfair, and
yeah.
that's why I don't.
We're being asked to do it because a majority of the board members 2 weeks ago said they wanted to put it on this agenda. And soon we're going to be asked if you want to do a motion to vote on it.
So
I would clarify what I say. I believe schools should be supported by income. I believe New York State should support schools by taxing wealth and income and spreading it out equally amongst all school districts based on need. But that's not how we do it. So I don't feel comfortable giving carve-outs to different people when there's a lot of reasons we support our schools. The state has set it up as, where do you live, pay based on the value of your home, and I'm very comfortable not doing any carve-outs for that. I
Jeremy-
wish we did it differently.
I want to get to a vote, but I wanted to make sure that if there are any other board members who have comments or want to add anything in.
I mean, I guess I just see it as like an updated version of a policy that this had been brought forth, because the premise of it is to protect what is construed as a vulnerable population, particularly in a time of inflation. And I certainly understand all the misgivings everybody has in terms of it not really seeming like a decision that a group of 7 people should make. I mean, I'm inclined to be supportive of it. I just don't know that I believe it should reside with our authority making. It seems beyond the parameters of what, and if that's just the way that it is, that's the way that it is. But it seems very, like, it doesn't seem to give an opportunity for the people who are actually going to be impacted by it, the tax-paying citizens of this town. And so that, for that reason, it feels very awkward. But that doesn't mean that, I mean, if somebody asks me would I support it, if you put me up against a wall, I'll support it. But I do think that it doesn't feel right that we're the ones who are making this call that's going to impact a broad population of 8,000 people, a certain amount of which are going to be impacted by this as actual taxpayers. That's it's not a philosophical, I think maybe Jeremy and I disagree on the philosophy behind what's being asked of us, but I just don't know that I feel like I'm the person who should be able to tell somebody else, yours is going to have to be more. Because I do actually think, I mean, in terms of what Jeremy was saying, that, we go by the asset and how much a house, well, the thing is, the problem is for people who are socioeconomically vulnerable. I have a neighbor down the street who's lived there since that house was developed in 1957. But he can't pay what it's assessed at now, because it hadn't been assessed for like 40 years. And now suddenly he's an old man who doesn't have the income to be able to pay the, I mean, I'm not saying that that's actually true of him, but I'm saying if he were to be somebody who his income is only these, very discrete categories, it doesn't seem fair to say, well, you're just out of luck because you live in a house that's now worth, $1 million, where when you moved in it and, as a teacher, you were able to live in a normal middle-class community. That's not the community, and that's not the economic circumstances of the reality. So I don't disagree with Jeremy. I just think that this is more complex than something we should decide in 2 meetings. And I think that's my,
So Bill, can we table this? Is that an
You have
option?
full right to
Okay.
do whatever you want. This is your chance to vote on it for this year, though, so that would go,
Yeah, if
by
you table it,
tabling
it's
it,
just like a
mean
no
next
vote.
year,
Yeah.
you'd be
That's
pushing it to a
Right.
future year.
I mean-
And be cognizant, the village, I'm not advocating.
A lot- No,
I understand, right.
Just factual, the village has adopted it. It appears that most of the other quads will adopt it.
Yeah.
They're bringing it to their boards. We don't know the final on that.
Many
but this-
districts in Westchester have already
Yeah.
adopted.
So
So-
if the village adopted it, then why are they asking us?
No,
Because
because
they're
they,
village tax
they're
only.
collecting
So,
taxes
Alex-
for the schools.
But you can table it, just
Yeah.
pushes it out.
Alex, I don't know if you actually table things. You could just ask if there's a motion to vote on it.
That's the-
And if there's no motion, if there's no 2 people that support on it,
Okay.
it sort of is
That's the-
moved
Okay.
on. But as Bill and Maureen were saying, it's a timed thing. And if it doesn't happen in early November, it doesn't happen for
One cycle.
one cycle.
Right.
Which is already like over a year off,
Right.
so, you know.
Okay.
But people would still be eligible to apply for it under the previous criteria. So that same parameter
Well,
would still be in place.
we know who those people are because they're already, you know,
The
part of it.
exemptions would continue at 37,000, and
Exactly, right.
Enhanced Star would continue at 92.
Right, exactly. So
All
it's
right.
not as though that category of people is going to be disenfranchised by us not expanding the group. It just means more people aren't going to be able to take advantage of it because the income threshold hasn't changed.
Correct.
But it has
So-
for the town, right?
For the village taxes it has,
The village
yes.
taxes
Yes.
for
Correct.
that group have
So
already been
on that note,
adjusted.
I think we're settled at a place here. Is there a motion to approve the resolution changing the maximum income level for eligible senior citizens? So there isn't. Okay. So we'll move forward. In business, part C, the
Just one question before we move on. How does this get brought up again? Does one of us have to propose it again?
I guess, next year or whenever.
Because this
It doesn't just come up every year?
Yeah, I
and
mean,
it'll be brought-
yeah, I mean, I just want to say I think that the idea, like, not that I'm advocating, but I think the reason it is left up to like boards is the idea that you want, like, we do want local control. So I think it's like sometimes, you know, in some ways we complain when the state mandates things but I think it's trying to understand in a community, where's the like, is there a value to having a diverse group of people live in it? Like, whether it be their age, their income levels. And I think that, you know, again, in New York, we talk a lot about that, like, oh, we want it, you know, so different. And I think it may not be perfect, but I think these type of things are attempts to create some communities that maybe in a little way can kind of help support that. So I think that's the idea. And that's why I think, although I know you're choosing not to do it, interestingly enough, even districts that typically don't even do the veterans adopted this one. So it is, you know, I think going to be widely adopted across Westchester County.
I just feel like, I
Yeah.
just want to say that, the reason why I don't want us to vote is because it may become a no. And when it becomes a no, then we have to reappeal it. But this time, if we are just not putting the motion to vote, there's a chance that next year we can sort of bring it again. Because voting a no means we have to reappeal
It's the same,
it.
it's the same difference. It's
Well,
just-
if you are not, I mean, I think the mechanism is more different. So far as I'm concerned, this is like tabling it to another year, which will come only next year. That's how,
Yeah.
that's how I see this
Yeah,
to
I
be,
mean-
than saying no and then trying to reverse it. I was going to, anyway, my
Okay.
second direct question is, can we as a board say that the strategy by which we want to make this decision is to throw it out to the community to vote?
Well,
We
no, that
cannot?
wouldn't- We can't do
Okay.
that.
It's not structured before you.
It's not structured for us that
No,
way?
no,
Okay, got it.
The only thing I would suggest on this, and we really should move on, I think you've made a decision,
Yeah.
is just be ready with some explanation points, because you will be a bit alone on this. That's fine, you made the decision, just be ready, because you're alone relative to the village. You may be, I don't know yet, the other boards are bringing it tonight and the other couple nights this week, we'll know where the other districts are. You may be alone there, and I hear a rationale, which is need more understanding, more analysis, need to see how it plays out, and would be looking at next year, bringing it back and see.
Yeah,
But-
that's a fair assessment. All right, moving forward, we're considering under business C, the HTA coverage assignment side letter. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. In business, section D, placement of services for CSE and CPSE. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. For section 9, personnel as a consent agenda, are there any questions or comments about appointments, amendments, resignations, or leaves of absence? Is there a motion to approve section 9, appointments, amendments, resignations, and leaves of absence?
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Are there any questions or comments about our minutes from our 10:25 meeting? Is there a motion to approve our minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second read on policies. This is the immunization one that we saw at the last meeting, clarifying some of the gap, how to handle the students. Is there any questions or comments about policy 5420, on the immunization of students? Is there a motion to approve policy 5420?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, new business, we have a vote for NYSBA Area 10 Director. There were two individuals running for the position, Cheryl Brady and Deborah Gotti. I think we looked over their particular bio/resumes. Is there anybody that would like to make a comment in favor of either of the candidates?
I think both the candidates seem qualified. They each have different qualifications. I don't know if any of my colleagues would favoring one over the other.
I guess just in my read of the different candidates, like my inclination was probably to support Ms. Brady just because she serves in a local district in White Plains and has been on their board and has a familiarity with board business, both with her experience of 15 years and similarly in her professional life as somebody who works in the world of education and the various extracurricular activities that she cites. It seems that she performs in the educational context and really brings like a wealth of experience that is not solely her work for WPISBA, sorry for the acronym botch there, but I would say that she has a breadth of experience and obviously has a great passion for what she does, so I would be inclined to support her, but I also think Ms. Gotti seems like she would be great too.
I would agree with your points. I thought very similar.
I would third those points, both impressive candidates, but Ms. Brady definitely felt like a good fit from a Hastings perspective for me, Anyone else? So shall we just go around and say the names, I guess? Try it? Jeremy, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable supporting Ms. Brady, knowing that both candidates will continue in their role on their local school boards. This is just for who gets to be a director of our Area 10. I would be supportive of Ms. Brady.
That's a good point. Thank you.
I support Ms. Brady as well.
Ms. Brady. Ms. Brady.
Ms. Brady for me as well.
Ms. Brady.
Okay, so it's unanimous then. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a motion here, I guess, right? Oh, there is a motion, okay. Is there a motion to approve our board vote for Cheryl Brady as NYSBA Area 10 Director?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving on, second public comment. Still no public. So on to agenda review. This is for the next upcoming meetings.
Right, just to update. Key thing is, wow, we're into November, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Next meeting did get moved to Monday the 21st because the 22nd is the wonderful tradition, as I've heard about, but first time since I've been in
Thanksgiving for
district.
Project Share.
And that did get scheduled on top of your already scheduled board meeting, but hundreds upon hundreds are involved with Project Share, and so it was easier, and I'm glad you all quickly agreed to shift the meeting to Monday. The agenda is quite straightforward. There's quite a significant report coming to you from Dr. Szymanski, and she's so ahead. We're already looking at drafts and revising drafts. And so you'll get a taste of that. I do hope Hastings can continue to be super mature as it looks at assessment data and understand it, as several of you said, it's one indicator, one marker, not the ultimate. And because I know it's a little newer, at least in recent time, for Hastings to look publicly at generic aggregate data. Don't worry, it's not individual student by name. But I think that'll be the heart of next session. We can talk a bit more about budget, because we did have that listed there. Maybe we'll get some feedback through the officers. So board members, please be reaching your officers so we can plan out an effective meeting for you. Very importantly, on the 6th of December, as you heard, that we want to make that a meeting heavily focused on the portrait process and where we are with that. We tried some things tonight of just bringing you written reports, not verbal. We may want to do that again for the 6th, or make some other modifications so you have plenty of time to dig into the portrait process. We want to have some members of that process present to you, update you. It's not the final, please. This is just a key marker when we bring drafts out into the public. So we'll talk a bit more as we get closer to the 6th, but we may want to whittle that meeting down by way of content, because you also have, should be brief, but a public hearing that night on this video conferencing, and you are starting at 6:15 with a very important session on security.
Okay.
So, all right, so I'll stop there on the agenda, but those are what is before you the next 2 meetings.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. McCursey. Any Board of Education comments to wrap us up? No? Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.